Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I am one of your hosts, Jason Baum, and with me are Evelyn Coleman and Titus Fortner. Hey, everybody.
Hello, hello.
On today's episode, we've got a really awesome topic because it is somewhat new, but it is the future of testing as we know it. Google, I believe, put out this article relatively recently called WebDriver BiDi, the future of cross-browser automation. Titus, for those of us who don't know, myself, Evelyn, tell us a little bit. Sorry, Evelyn. I mean, maybe you know. Do you know what
No, I
BiDi
just
is?
asked you what this was, and then you hit record. Which I love, but I'm going to be learning it along with the audience. So please tell us,
That was some
Titus,
inside baseball right there. That's fun.
what is BiDi?
Yeah. So, Titus, tell us a little bit about what is WebDriver BiDi? What is BiDi?
Yeah, so BiDi is short for bidirectional, and it's a cross-browser way of talking about Chrome DevTools. So Chrome Debug Protocol is the way that Chrome developers were working on how to create the browser itself. So really low level, really digging into the internals of the browser to figure out how to test it and how to make the browser itself work. And they had a team that built the Chrome DevTools on top of that. And Puppeteer was kind of used to drive Chrome DevTools. And then a bunch of testers are like, wow, this is great. We have really low level access to the browser and can do all of these really cool things. Except every single browser version increase, how you work with the internals changes because the code changes. So we have a problem now if there is no stable API. You constantly have to change your test code to work with the internal implementation details. And Selenium is like, that's suboptimal. How about we work with the browser vendors and create a standard that we can all agree on for what the input and what the protocol is going to look like. And then each browser vendor can create their own DevTools implementation of that standard. And so right now, if you want to be using the DevTools, you are mostly Chrome only. Firefox did some implementation of a partial implementation of Chrome DevTools so that some of the tools could work for both Firefox and Chrome. But we want something that works for Safari and Firefox and Edge and Chrome. And so that's essentially it. BiDi is a standard that's going to make it easy to write your code once. Like Selenium right now, to support DevTools, we have to release a new version of Selenium with specific support for the version of Chrome that will work to do the underlying socket interface for the low-level DevTools functionality.
This is super cool.
Does that make sense?
No,
It does. So we like AI on this podcast. I thought it would be cool to take our question and ask Google's Bard that exact same question, but explain it to us like we're in fifth grade. And this is what it comes up with. And I would really be interested in, after hearing what you just heard, Evelyn, Titus, after explaining it, I would love your take on what Google's own AI says about BiDi. WebDriver BiDi is a new way to control web browsers. It's different from the old way because it allows the browser to send information back to the computer that's controlling it. This is important because it makes it possible to write better tests for web applications. Imagine you're trying to test a website that allows users to buy things. You want to make sure the website works correctly when users try to buy it. When the old way of controlling web browsers, you would have to tell the browser to go to the website, click the buy button, and then fill out the form. But what if the website doesn't work correctly when you do that? You wouldn't know because the browser wouldn't tell you anything. With WebDriver BiDi, the browser can send information back to the computer that's controlling it. So if the website doesn't work correctly when you're trying to buy something, the browser will tell you all about it. This will help you write better tests for your web applications. Here's an analogy that might help you understand. Oh my gosh, this continues to go on. I don't think we need to go any further, although this is really, really interesting to hear Google's Bard explain it. What do you think of that?
It was wrong, but
how was it wrong? Tell us.
Well, no, a WebDriver Classic, current Selenium does that, right? Like, it's not like BiDi is the only way to get information back about what the browser is doing. The difference is with BiDi, you can get information about console logs, like what are the JavaScript errors, right? So with Selenium, it's broken, but you don't have information about what was going on in the browser that might have caused that. Like, these assets weren't loading, this timeout error happened. Like, there's specific network requests that you can be evaluating in real time and toggling off of. One of the reasons it's called BiDi is bidirectional, it's asynchronous, right? So you're saying, hey, anytime this happens, just give information back to me about it. Selenium is all HTTPS, it's synchronous, it's a server. You send a command, you get information back. You ask for information, you get information back. So it's slow that way. With BiDi, you can say, hey, every time this event happens, send me information about it, which is great. Like, it could completely overwhelm your network traffic, right? Because you could ask for a lot of things that will give a lot of information, but it's allowing you to get more specific information about what might be going wrong instead of just something went wrong.
I like that. My question that I've been holding in is what took so long? Like, who was the holdout here in this battle for the control of the browsers? Was it the Chrome didn't want to play with the automation tools, or was it that we just never had a common table to have these discussions?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One, it took us forever to figure out the WebDriver specification itself. And then once we got the WebDriver specification figured out, and then it took us a long time to get Selenium 4 out, which did all of the stuff. And then Selenium is pretty much the group that's driving the need for this. Or like, hey, our users need this next thing, let's push it forward. And to be fair, the browser vendors have also jumped in and have really been swinging on this as well. Like, Puppeteer is going to be built off of the WebDriver BiDi specification going forward, right? Which is a huge commitment, and that's what that article was talking about, was just how committed to it. And then Firefox Mozilla has always been committed to it because, DevTools is a Chrome specific thing. Like, it's part of the problem is Chrome took over so much of the market share that a lot of people de facto decided that testing in Chrome was enough. And getting information from Chrome was enough. And, we know that there are some issues with cross-browser, cross-platform bugs and things like that. And a lot of people need to be able to test in all of the different platforms that their users use to make sure that nothing weird is happening between the browsers. And then some people are just like, let's just do Chrome only. That's good enough. And so the other browser vendors have a vested interest in doing it. So it's really nice that Chrome is also putting energy into an open standard, into the open web. The original DevTools team was not very receptive to collaboration. So that's part of it. And they've moved on to other things. And I don't know, collaboration is always better in my book. We want to work together to make the best product. We want to work with the browser vendors rather than trying to go around them, so that we can all agree on what the right thing is. It's slower. It absolutely is a slow process to do that. But I think it was Simon Stewart that's like, Christian Broman was telling me about this, but it's just like you go alone to go fast. You go together to go far.
Oh.
which I think is a good way of thinking about it, because that's really what Selenium as a project wants to be doing, wants to be coordinating with the browser vendors to make happen.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Evelyn, do you have another question?
I have so many questions. I'm sorry. In these negotiations, I don't know if you had a seat at that table or were privy to it, but were there any particularly like dramatic negotiations over, how elements need to be exposed or something? Like was there any like big arguments?
Well, I mean, a lot of the arguments already happened in WebDriver Classic, right? Like it took, I don't know, however many years from beginning to end to get that standard recommended by the W3C. So the great thing about it is we now all have experience doing, writing spec E's and working with these groups of people. And so it's a little easier to know what needs to be where and why. And a lot of it is now just going through the details of what all needs to be in it. I haven't seen any. I've only been at one BiDi meeting, and that was the one in Berlin that we kind of put together at the last minute to coordinate with the test automation summit I put on in Berlin. And there wasn't a whole lot of arguing. There was just a whole lot of explaining and a whole lot of trying to work through blockers and kind of to talk about what was needed and honestly, it was talking about how we could work together better, right? Because Google, I know it was great. It was great. Google and Mozilla were both, working on different features at this, and we're like, can we prioritize things? Can we work to like make sure that, hey, this is ready to go? Like right now, I don't know, yeah, there's certain things like the console logging, the logging in general, and the browser context, that's all implemented and ready to go. And in Selenium, we're slowly adding that to the bindings. So some of the stuff can be used right now, the BiDi specification, not just the old DevTools implementation. So it's exciting. We've got a lot of work to do on the Selenium side to make it all happen.
What do you see are the challenges when it comes to BiDi?
For implementing or for
using?
using?
for implementing, like for using BiDi.
Yeah, it's a slightly different approach, right? Like, so I mean, one of the problems Selenium is having, right? So JavaScript, obviously, it's async, everything's async. Everyone knows how to do the working with bidirectional information. Java and Ruby are both using essentially a combination of threads and lambdas in order to implement it, right? Like you spin off a new thread and you have a code that gets executed saying every time this happens, give information back. And so you're separating that out. Both Python and .NET, the idiomatic way to do it is async await, similar to what JavaScript does, but you can't mix the synchronous and the asynchronous code. Like the synchronous code has to be wrapped in the asynchronous. And so you can't actually reuse the libraries we have right now. And so we're still trying to figure out how Selenium is going to implement it in those languages. And so part of this is just, hey, a lot of testers aren't used to working with lambdas. A lot of users aren't used to thinking about some of these advanced data structures that will be needed to, I say advanced, they're really not that advanced, but it's just not what a lot of testers traditionally do. And so there's going to be a learning curve to think about things asynchronously, think about using an async await pattern or using lambdas and things like that. So it's going to be a little bit more complex that way, but also again super powerful because you get all of this information. There are a number of features that are open up, like basic authentication is one that's coming, right? Like basic authentication, you can't do in Selenium anymore. It used to be you would just pass it in as part of the URL, and then the browser said that's unsafe. We're not going to support that anymore. And so now there's no way in Selenium to do that. There is a way in Chrome DevTools to do that. And now we're going to make it a way to do that in BiDi, that kind of a thing. So, right. So there's features and things that can't be done right now in Selenium that we're going to work on supporting. The network interception stuff is super exciting, ways to filter out. Don't don't load these commands, redirect these commands, like super powerful stuff when it comes to working with mocks, or like mocking things out instead of needing service virtualization, all sorts of stuff coming. It's going to be super powerful, but the syntax for doing it and some of the data structures that will be needed, it'll take a bit for the average SDAT to learn how to do, I think. It's gonna be great for SDATs because they're going to get more exposure to more interesting things in the languages.
That's awesome. I have one more question if Jason doesn't mind, or I don't know. Titus, what do you, I know in the past for me as a millennial, like I've gone through a lot of different types of browsers, and there's always those infographics where it shows you like which one is the most popular browser over time and what's up and coming. What does this change mean for anyone who might be out there thinking that they're the next big browser vendor?
Well, I mean, this is all about how to interact and test the browsers. Like, this shouldn't have any impact on what users decide to use. And it's interesting because both Firefox and then even Edge are trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves from Chrome. Usually it's performance and security and privacy, and we haven't necessarily seen. And then there's some like niche browsers, right, that really go all in on some of those things. And so far, we really haven't seen much industry traction to choose. Like, everyone's just like, Google, Chrome default, and I don't know, it's kind of what I did, right? When I switched from Firefox to Google, when Google had certain features that Firefox didn't have, and pretty much out of inertia have stayed there since. And I haven't felt like I needed to find something with more privacy or security or anything like that, for good or bad. But yeah, I don't think this feature, this integration, this testing is gonna move the needle on browser market share.
Oh no, for sure. Not for the users, but I just mean like if you were to develop a new browser now, would this be something that you had to?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would want to. But I mean, a lot of new browsers now are even based on, a lot of them are based on Chromium underneath, right?
Yeah,
And
that's true.
so I mean, which is again good and bad. It's good that you don't have to build your own thing, but it's bad because, i.e., like, take a look at, Internet Explorer 6, right? Like, everyone used it and it was horrible and it had all sorts of problems and all sorts of incompatibility. And all of the coding that you did for your sites was to get it to work in IE6, even if it didn't work in the actual more compatible browsers. And I think we're starting to see some of that with Chrome. We're starting to see people making it so that things work on Chrome, even if they might not work in other browsers. And that is just, again, as proponents and supporters of the open web, that's not a good trend. But yeah.
What does this mean for WebDriver? Like, is this the end of WebDriver Classic, or is this an option? What is that like? What is the landscape now when it comes to?
No, it's a great question. That's the one we're not quite sure about, right? Like, especially when we don't know how we're going to implement this in 2 of our 5 languages. It's I think the way, like, obviously we're going to try and get rid of our Chrome DevTools support as soon as we get enough work done in BiDi. We want to get rid of the extra functionality that we're providing with Chrome DevTools in a vendor specific way. So we don't have to worry about versions. We don't have to worry about, like, oh yes, you're using, Chrome, 99. You have to downgrade your Selenium version in order for it to work because we no longer support Chrome not yet. Things like that. I am expecting that we will start replacing WebDriver Classic specification functionality in Selenium with WebDriver BiDi specified functionality. And whether that's going to be, you can choose which mode you're in, or if it's under the hood and you don't care if, the navigations are happening with the driver, with the Classic or BiDi. I think we're still going to go through the driver for most of this stuff. Like, the driver is what's going to be able to open it. So you need a driver. I don't think we're going to be able to completely get rid of the drivers. but the being able to communicate directly between the code and the browser with the socket and the port might remove the need to do a lot of things through the browser. But it's not going to be an either or. We're going to be able to do both, and figuring out how we're going to maintain both and when we're going to switch over from one to another. It's probably going to be somewhat similar to what we did going from the old JSON wire protocol to the W3C. But we'll see. And there are things we learned by doing that transition.
So we're at like the very beginning here. This is the start. Yeah.
We have we literally have 2 of the modules implemented of the few dozen that are in process of being, and the W3C has specified that the specification has several more modules that Selenium hasn't gotten to yet. Cool. And honestly, the primary person who's been driving the BiDi implementation on the Selenium team is on parental leave for a while. So we're kind of in a slight holding pattern on some of that for pushing things forward, just because, again, development resources we have and just trying to keep things moving forward.
Question, Titus, if you were a budding automation engineer and you found yourself in a difficult and competitive economic climate, would you invest any of your time in learning some of this? Are there already any resources out there? What would you say to our listeners who are developing themselves either as budding or continuing education for test automators?
Yeah, no, I think we all understand that this bidirectional approach is the future of cross-browser testing. Agree with what Google is saying. And so even if we don't have the BiDi stuff, the things that you can do in Chrome DevTools today, the way that you have to write the code in order for that to work, taking a look at what Selenium is doing right now with DevTools, and some of the same way of doing that's going to apply when we transition to using the BiDi specifically. But a lot of the, learning how to use the lambdas and understanding threading a little bit better, and being able to, everyone should understand how mock services work, and being able to do network interception type things to understand. I don't think in general, and this just gets into testing nerdery, but just test the things you have control over instead of the things that you don't. Like, so often we're like, yes, you're essentially testing your PDF generation software. Did you write that? I'm like, no, that's this other. I'm like, yeah, don't test that. Like, you can't fix a bug that you find. So like finding ways to like mock out that stuff. And when you have all that power in the front end, now just, you don't have to load the third party, add-ons and things like that show up in the browser. You just filter that out, or direct your backend to a different QA server on the fly, that kind of a thing. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do. And so just understanding how that stuff works will set you up for being able to make use of some of the functionality we're going to be seeing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so this question, maybe this answer, maybe you don't, but I'm just curious because we are seeing so much emerging technologies. And obviously I'm a huge fan of Bard and whatnot. So and ChatGPT, got to give that one love too. Now this isn't a chat. I'm not going to ask about a chatbot, but for the future of BiDi, how do you see it working with new technologies like voice activated devices or augmented reality? Like, is that something that BiDi will allow for testing of that perhaps we couldn't do before?
Well, if the browser supports it, depends on how the browser supports it, I guess. So that is one of the things that opening up this BiDi specification, it allows you to dig deeper into some of the newer features that are being developed. But again, we would have to have something specified in BiDi saying, hey, this new feature is implemented in all of the browsers now that natively does these things. And I honestly actually don't know how extensions are, like extension support in Selenium, like you can load them, but there's limited ability to interact with specific extensions in Selenium. And I honestly don't know what that looks like in BiDi. And I'm curious to see what that looks like. So I'm guessing that a lot of this stuff is not going to be native to the browser itself, but there's going to be plugins and there's going to be add-ons and extensions. And in some fashion, BiDi is going to allow you to interact with those. I'm not sure yet what that'll look like. That's down the road.
That's going to be exciting to see where that goes.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I take a crack at that to say that any of these motions where we're having standards put in place to be able to communicate across technologies is pertinent to things like AI and augmented reality and things, because I feel like those technologies require more the ability to capture things in real time that maybe some of our older technologies didn't require as much. And as long as we're having conversations where we're setting new standards and able to communicate across technologies, and I know that maybe this one doesn't touch on BiDi as much, that these types of technologies don't, but these conversations happening pave the way for other conversations to happen, and those ones might affect these technologies. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so next time Titus is in the room with all these people, he's going to have to ask about that question. Tell him Jason sent you. No, just kidding.
What
Cool.
are we doing about the robots? Tell us.
Yeah, exactly. It's in a future episode of Black Mirror, I think. It's coming back. So
We should do a Black Mirror episode of the podcast where, I don't know, we talk about like some of
invented
the
technology.
Kooky, just like really kooky technology that's out there, things that we don't think is going anywhere, but we act as though it's the future. Like we all pick something that we don't think has like a lot of purchase, but then we have a podcast where we act as though that's like the next thing, and we talk about how it affects testing.
I'll pick ChatGPT.
Oh, Titus!
That was too easy. Too easy.
Crash and burn.
Could have been so much more creative there. Titus, Evelyn, thanks.
Well, maybe ChatGPT 5 will impress me. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, ChatGPT 5 is basically gonna like enter the prompt for you. You'll think it and it will prompt itself, I think.
It's Neuralink capable because the Neuralink people and the ChatGPT people sat down at a table and they had a conversation about web standards, and they were all inspired by BiDi.
They should do it. Now we just gave them an idea. There you go. All right.
Sorry.
OpenAI, take it, run with it. You could send the checks to us. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys, as usual. It was great. Hope you had as much fun listening as we do recording these. Looking forward to the next one, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much. This has been Test Case Scenario.